Hey, what's going on, APUSH people? We have Key Concept 6.1 for you today. This one is the first of three major videos from period number 6, which goes from 1865 to 1898. Before we begin, I want to give a huge shout out to Leah F. I'm so sorry I missed you in an earlier video. You have been incredibly supportive. I really appreciate it. Stone K and David P, you guys are awesome as well. Thank you all so much for your support. You rock. If you want a shout out, put it in the comments below and I will do my best to give you one in a future video. Let's start off by reading what exactly Key Concept 6.1 says. It says the rise of big business in the United States encouraged massive migrations and urbanization, sparked government and popular efforts to reshape the U.S. economy and environment, and renewed debates over the U.S. national identity. That is from page 60 of the Curricular Framework. If you have not downloaded that already, what are you waiting for? Check it out in the description below. So some big ideas to focus on. What was the relationship between businesses and government? What were reasons for migration within the country and immigration during this time? And finally, in what ways did the South change and remain the same? That falls under that idea of change and continuity over time, which is something that you could see an essay written on. So pay close attention to that. All right, Key Concept 6.1, Roman numeral 1, large-scale production accompanied by massive technological change, expanding international communication networks, and pro-growth government policies fueled the development of a Gilded Age. You see Gilded Age in quotes. Very important to know that term. Marked by an emphasis on consumption, marketing, and business consolidation. So let's start off first before we get into letter A. What is a Gilded Age? Well, it's a time period that lasts from the 1870s to the 1900s. It's going on during Reconstruction in the late 19th century. And this was coined by this guy, Mark Twain. And we see a huge increase in industrialization in the United States during this time. Also, the term itself actually means this idea that many things appear to be good on the surface. If you look at the surface level of issues, things appear to be good. But if you dig a little deeper, you'll notice that there are many problems below, which we'll get into. So letter A talks about government subsidies for transportation and communication systems. This is a big idea that we've talked about before. The government provided money and gave land grants for construction of various railroads. So the government took an active role in the development of the Transcontinental Railroad. What were the impacts of these subsidies? Well, new markets were opened in North America. We see farms develop drastically out west. Lumber industries flourish, and we see a huge growth of cities as well. We also have during this time redesigned financial and management structures. Monopolies begin to emerge, which sought to have sole control over an industry, and they did so by maximizing the exploitation of resources and labor force. So if you were the only business in an industry, you have a lot of power. That's something we'll talk about in this video. And we see this with Carnegie in the steel industry at Rockefeller and the oil industry. Okay, letter B, businesses and foreign policymakers looked outside U.S. borders to gain influence and control end markets. Ever since Manifest Destiny has been complete, the U.S. will seek to expand beyond its borders, but not necessarily to take over land, but rather to trade. In the Pacific, there are calls for the annexation of Hawaii in the 1890s, which eventually does happen, and that's because Hawaii is a major sugar producer. In Asia, the Philippines are gained after the Spanish-American War in 1898, and that is also a new market. And also in 1899, we have the open door policy in China written by this guy, John Hay, who was a secretary, and this stated that the U.S. could trade freely with China. That was very important. The U.S. wanted open markets for money for their businesses. Latin America, we see American-owned sugar plantations in Puerto Rico and also in Cuba are very popular during this time. And for letter C, we see the emergence of trusts and holding companies. These are very powerful business organizations that control many aspects of industry. So what the heck is a trust? Let's start there first. This was really pioneered and developed by Rockefeller, and several companies would sell their shares to Rockefeller, and they would be under the control of one executive board, which would be run by Rockefeller and his business associates. So it's essentially competing firms in an industry. Let's stick with the oil industry. He would buy up shares of different oil companies and then have control of them. So it's essentially a monopoly. So how did business leaders like Rockefeller and Carnegie and these other wealthy men defend their status? Well, they use this idea of social Darwinism. This idea that the rich argued that they were a result of natural selection. And it's perfectly okay for the powerful to do what they need in order to survive and flourish. We see conspicuous consumption and relative poverty in cities and society. And here's that contrast that we talked about in the beginning, this Gilded Age. When you look on the surface, that there are several problems below the surface. So you have the rich are spending money lavishly. The wealthy were encouraging cities to spend money on museums, libraries, etc. for places for them. And they also would spend lots of money on elaborate housing, clothing, etc. Now, on the other end, that there are a lot of people living in poverty, and they often lived in tenement houses. And this is a term you should be familiar with. And this was really brought to the attention to the American people by this guy, Jacob Riis, who was a photographer. And here's one of his famous photographs. He published a book in 1890 titled How the Other Half Lives. And what this does is he went through New York City and really photographed the poor living there. So on one end, you see conspicuous consumption. On the other end, you see tenement houses. All right, 6.1 Roman numeral 2 says, as leaders of big business and their allies in government aimed to create a unified industrialized nation, they were challenged in different ways by demographic issues, regional differences, and labor movements. So letter A, we're going to talk about the expansion of workforce. We have an internal migration in which farmers were moving to cities in increased numbers to work in factories. Many farmers were having a hard time and losing money, so there was more financial opportunities for them in cities working in factories. We also have immigrants coming across national borders to the United States, and we see new immigration develop during this time. We talked about old immigration before, those that came from Northern and Western Europe. For new immigration, these are people predominantly from Southern and Eastern Europe, people that are coming from Italy and Greece, etc. And there were a significant amount of immigrants coming from China, but we'll see that there's something else that happens with them. So what is the impact of this huge expansion of the workforce? Well, we have a diverse workforce because of immigrants. We have lower wages because there's a huge supply of labor, and there is more child labor as well to help families out. So the huge supply of workers led to lower wages. This is a big idea in economics. Usually the more of a supply there is, the cheaper that price is. So labor versus management, there are issues that develop, and they really are over wages and working conditions. Local and national unions emerge to confront businesses. You have the Knights of Labor, led by this guy, Terence Powderly, who may very well have the longest, thickest mustache I've ever seen in my life. Please know that the Knights of Labor were made up of skilled and unskilled workers. They also were open to women and African Americans, but for them, their downfall was the Haymarket Square riot in 1886 in Chicago, when an anarchist threw a bomb at this riot. Now, the Knights were not linked to this anarchist, but because they were associated with Haymarket Square, that event led to their downfall. I do have a more detailed video on unions in the description below. Be sure to check it out. After the Knights comes the American Federation of Labor, or AFL, led by Samuel Gompers. And the difference between the AFL and the Knights is that the AFL only allowed skilled workers, and they focused on bread and butter issues, things exclusively like pay, working conditions, and hours. So the South had some areas of industrialization during this time, and there are leaders that call for a new South, including this guy, Henry Grady. He was the editor of the Atlantic Constitution, so he's calling for an increased industrialization in the South, and you begin to see textile factories appearing in the South. And this is the slow transition of the South from a farming industry, from predominantly agriculture, to industrialization. So it's very, very small during this time. Agriculture is what predominantly dominates the South, especially sharecropping, but there are calls for industrialization. And as I just mentioned, sharecropping and tenant farming remain dominant. And many African Americans in the South were still stuck as sharecroppers throughout the 1800s. So even though there begins to be industrialization, African Americans are still predominantly stuck as sharecroppers. All right, we'll finish up with 6.1, Roman numeral 3, Western migration. New systems of farming and transportation and economic instability led to political and popular conflicts. Government agencies and conservationist organizations sought to extend public control over natural resources. As the U.S. expands and as businesses are expanding, there's debates over the resources of this country. And some people call for the government to extend their control. So we have the U.S. Fish Commission, which was created in 1871 to promote and preserve fisheries in the United States. There's a symbol if you ever wondered what that looked like. We also have the Sierra Club, which was founded by John Muir in 1892. And he was advocated the protection of wild places on Earth. And John Muir, that's a name you should be familiar with. You should absolutely know he was a huge advocate or in favor of protecting wild places on Earth. Farmer organizations begin to develop to resist corporate control of agricultural markets. So essentially, this is the farmers' version of unions. We had the Grange from the 1860s. They sought to bring farmers together to share techniques. And they hoped to elect state legislators that were favorable to their programs. Granger Laws, be familiar with this term. These were laws that states passed that regulated railroads. Now, the Southern Farmers Alliance was mostly a local organization as well, and they established stores and banks. But unfortunately, they excluded African Americans, so that led to the Colored Farmers Alliance, which was the same thing but was an organization meant for African Americans. That was mostly in the southern United States. So with the creation of the People's Party or the Populist Party, this is specifically mentioned, so make sure you know this. It's made up of mostly farmers out west. So what are some causes? Well, we have the growth of corporate power, particularly railroads, that would charge really high rates that would hurt farmers. And we also had economic instability, especially in 1873 and 1893. The country goes through two panics. Then these really hurt farmers. So what were the goals of the People's Party or the Populist Party? Well, they wanted political reform. They wanted things like the direct election of senators. They wanted government ownership of railroads, telephones, and telegraphs. The direct election of senators, we'll learn during the Progressive Era, does come to fruition with the 17th Amendment. They also advocated a stronger government role in the American economic system. They favored a graduated income tax, inflation of currency, which is known as free silver, and the abolishment of national banks as well. So next we have business interests versus conservationists. Again, there is a battle between these two, and there's an establishment of national parks and other conservationist and preservationist measures. So the National Reclamation Act, also known as the Newlands Act, provided for federal money for construction of dams, canals, and reservoirs, and the park system grows under President Teddy Roosevelt. And this is slightly outside that time period, but still is this idea of business versus the government. Here's Teddy Roosevelt with John Muir, and they're standing on an edge that's about 3,000 feet down. And I'm not going to lie, my heart is racing right now because I'm absolutely terrified of heights. I don't think you could pay me enough to get out on that ledge. I would be very scared. And Roosevelt, during his presidency, used executive powers to restrict the development of land. All right, let's go over some test tips for multiple choice and short answer. Be able to describe changes in business structure and their effects, the growth of monopolies and such, the role of government during the Gilded Age, and the plight of farmers, talking about the populists. And finally, the goals of labor unions. Why were they formed and what were their goals? For essay questions, comparing the government during the Gilded Age versus other time periods, maybe the Progressive Era, maybe the New Deal, could go across time periods, and ways that farmers and laborers resisted corporations. That's talking about the Grange, the formation of the Grange, the formation of labor unions. All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching. If you have not already, please take a moment and subscribe to my channel. Help me spread the word. If you found this video helpful, please share it with somebody. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I will get back to you. Let me know, how cool do you think Terrence Powderly's mustache is? I'm going for lusciousness, probably a 10, but I don't know about you. Let me know what you think. I will see you right back here for 6.2, and make sure you check out other videos in the description that give more detail on things I mentioned in here. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you right back here soon. Have a good day.